Cade. How high are you gonna go?
Really high! Faster!
Oh no! It's so high. Oh, here we go! Go! Alright, so a big storm just went through and it's the best time to go out and shoot landscapes. So I'm gonna try to drive by a couple of my favorite spots and see if we can find something to shoot. Alright, so I raced out here to hopefully catch some of those dramatic clouds, and this is what I am left with. A lot of blue skies and dissipating clouds. You know, this is one of those things with landscape photography, you just gotta roll with the punches. Sometimes you get rewarded with a beautiful sky and sometimes you don't. It's about 10:30 in the morning and it's not really the best time to take landscapes when the sun is out in full force and pretty high in the sky. So generally what I like to do in these situations is either do a long exposure and maybe convert it to black and white, or find another scene that doesn't really incorporate the sky. So I'm gonna look around here and see if we can find anything. How did that get up there? You know, I don't know what it is. I'm just not feeling this spot. Usually the forest in the middle of the day is really good because the light of midday sun is sort of softened and you can find some really good shots, but I think I just keep walking into spider webs, and I wore the wrong shoes today. They're extremely muddy, and I don't know, I'm just not feeling this spot. I did notice though that there's a bright blue sky and there's also some white puffy clouds. I'm thinking I'm gonna get off this trail and I'm gonna go find a good scene for a long exposure. Now that looks interesting. Anytime you find like a really cool structure or building can sometimes make for a good long exposure, so I'm gonna go check that out. Long exposure is a lot of fun. Basically, what it allows you to do is smooth out subjects or things that are moving. For landscapes, generally it's water or clouds. My hope is to capture these clouds as they move across the horizon and capture this really cool sort of streaking effect. I've got a tripod that's going to hold my camera steady throughout the shot. I also have a 10-stop neutral density filter. Now, a neutral density filter is just like a dark piece of glass. It just cuts out some of that sunlight so that you can use a really slow shutter speed, which is critical to the long exposure. I want to go ahead and focus on this area first and then lock it down so that it doesn't change. So I'm going to go ahead and half press the shutter button here, going to lock focus, and then I'm going to disable autofocus on my camera. So now that I've locked the focus, I'm going to go ahead and screw on the neutral density filter to the front of the lens, and we want to be real careful to not bump the lens too much. Now with the camera settings, I like to shoot in manual mode. I want complete control over the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. I want really predictable results, and that's the best way to get them. So the first thing we want to do is adjust our ISO to 100, or the lowest possible ISO value for your camera. Secondly, we want to adjust the aperture. I like to set it to around f11. It's a good aperture where you're going to get really sharp images, and it's also going to cut down on some of the light coming into the camera which again helps slow down that shutter speed. So what I like to do is I'll start with a shutter speed of 30 seconds, and then I'll kind of adjust from there depending on how bright or dark the image comes out. But you can also get a long exposure app for your phone. The app will kind of spit out a recommended shutter speed that you can play with. But this is photography. It's meant to be creative and fun. So this isn't, there's no film in here, so I can take photo after photo and not have to worry about it. And that's kind of how I like to do things. There's 2 more little tips that will help you out to get really sharp results. First is if your lens comes with vibration reduction or image stabilization, go ahead and turn that off. So on my camera here, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off because we're mounted to a tripod. We don't want our lens compensating for movements that aren't there. Secondly, before we press the shutter button, we want to go ahead and engage the self-timer. The self-timer basically counts down and then takes the shot so you can get your hands off the camera. So I actually already have my camera set up that way. So I'm going to go ahead and take a shot. And now we wait 30 seconds to see how this turns out. Whoa! Turn it, Z! Turn it! Here's another shot as I'm again pointing straight down, and he's got this little dandelion and again harsh shadows, not very flattering. And now what I've done is I've moved him under some shade, and I also got low. So you can see here in just a second how much better this looks.